The Buck Sexton Show.
We're now joined one of our favorite guests, reporter for National Review, Kat Timpf. She joins us now to talk about her latest in National Review, which is Are You There, Hillary? It's Me, a Middle-Class Millennial Female, on nationalreview.com right now. Kat, thank you for calling in.
Oh, thank you for having me.
All right. Tell us, you've got this open letter to Hillary. What are you telling the lovely Hills?
Well, I just was really shocked to hear her talking about criminal justice reform and how we just need to get all these people out of prison when it wasn't, in the 90s. She's actually saying we need more prisons, bragging about how much more prison funding her husband, president at the time, obviously had raised, and saying, we need tougher sentences. So how can you say now keeping them behind bars doesn't do anything to reduce crime if before you were saying that that's what we need to do in order to reduce crime? We need something in the middle here to explain this.
Well, yeah, I think this goes along with her. She now has almost a Soviet Politburo-like approach to her previous. They used to, and this was true in the Politburo and the archives and the KGB. They would go through with a razor sometimes and remove people's names or just try to remove them from existence on paper. And I think she's trying to do that with her position on gay marriage. I mean, she was visible or audibly furious and flustered when somebody said, you used to be against gay marriage, and now you're all of a sudden all about gay marriage. I think it's interesting to see her on this issue as well, where, as you point out, it's not just like, oh, Bill, your husband pushed these policies. Right. It's that she wanted to be, because she thought she was sort of the first lady that acted like that was also an elected position. She wanted to be associated with these tough on crime policies as well.
Right. It's not even like she just, silently supported it. Like, oh, yeah, I support my husband. But she went out and was giving these speeches. And, I really don't think there's anything wrong, of course, with changing your position as times change. I think that's fine. I think that why would we talk about these issues at all if we didn't hope to maybe change people's minds? But you can't you can't not explain why, right? Because she didn't even acknowledge how she may have supported policies or did support policies that definitely contributed to this problem. You think you should apologize, admit you're wrong, or at the very least even acknowledge that you did this before you start essentially what I would call exploiting this group of people for your own political gain. Because it is a really, really serious tragedy for some of these families, particularly with, some mandatory minimums and those kinds of things.
Right. I think that what's interesting here is that the narrative that's being advanced, because it is true that people like Senator Rand Paul and sort of more libertarian and libertarian conservatives are out there talking about over-criminalization is an issue, and you can look specifically at that, and that goes into sort of mandatory minimums. But this is being held up specifically as a racial issue by Democrats, meaning that there are too many minorities in prison, and that is in and of itself the injustice. Whereas I think you need to look at why are people in prison. That's the problem, irrespective of their background, of their ethnicity, of anything else. Looking at mandatory minimums for nonviolent crimes, first offenders who get hard time for an issue that clearly, that's where I think there's the real opportunity for reform that's meaningful in people's lives. But just to make it an issue of race, I think, is shameless demagoguery from people like Hillary, because they're not actually getting into the problem at all. It's not disproportionate representation in our prisons is not in and of itself something that, can be looked at and say, well, we're just going to change that, or we're not going to have quota systems in prison. It's the actual laws. Drug laws disproportionately impact minorities, but laws in general in this country, criminal laws and regulatory laws that have criminal penalties, there's far too many of them, and a lot of them have too much discretion for prosecutors and for judges to nail somebody.
Right, absolutely. Well, everything about this is shameless. It seems pretty clear that she saw that people were responding positively to some of the things Rand Paul was saying and calling for a necessary change in criminal justice. And so she said, oh, okay, that's the cool thing to say. All right, I'm going to go with that now without any explanation. So I don't know, who knows what she actually really believes. But yeah, mandatory minimums in general, I mean, we really need to be talking about those laws. I can't believe that they still exist in the way that they do. I mean, it just takes away being able to look at all the circumstances surrounding an incident. How could that be a positive thing? How could that be a positive thing? Because all situations are different. So I don't know.
Right, the politics, and this takes us back to the
lazy to me.
Yeah, well, this takes us back to the politics of the 90s, where because particularly in the early 90s, the country did have much higher crime rates, and there was a sense that there was this continuous uptick in the crime wave, that politicians wanted to look tough. The easiest way to do it was to increase sentences, make it mandatory, lock people away for longer periods of time. Well, no one believes that Congress uses a scalpel and is a bunch of geniuses on other issues. But on this one, there's sort of there's hesitancy, I think, to recognize that Congress overreached on some of these issues, over-criminalized many things, made penalties there should be, first of all, there should be a huge separation. And Kat, I mean, I just really at this point want to get your opinion on some of this. I mean, I think there should be a separation just right off the bat from violent crimes and everything else, right? I mean, the notion that somebody could get 4 years in a federal penitentiary for tax crimes and they're next to somebody who was, a hitman for a cartel, that's not okay. I mean, and they're serving the same kind of sentence in the same kind of cells.
Right. I totally agree, especially because spending time in prison, it doesn't really help anybody, right? I mean, you come out of there and you have a felony on your record, or you want to know you've been in prison for a couple decades without living in society, and then they want to know why those people end up going back. I mean, you're making it as hard as possible for these people to,
Right. There's almost no chance. I mean, if you're a convicted felon.
People. Right.
Yeah, if you're a convicted felon, even of a non-violent felony, I mean, even for check fraud or something like that, trying to get a job afterwards is essentially impossible. And also, it follows you around everywhere. I mean, you can't sort of just start anew, move to a new town or a new state and say, all right, like I learned my lesson, I'm going to be on the straight and narrow now. The first thing they'll do is they'll run a background check on you. You have to mark on every job application, have you been convicted of a felony? And I just think it's interesting that Democrats have been so unwilling, despite their endless pandering to different communities in this country based upon ethnicity. They won't actually do anything to help them in this regard because they're so terrified of looking weak on crime and weak on the war on drugs. So I think that there's a lot of hypocrisy, and I think Hillary sort of stepped right into that now and assuming, as you point out in this open letter, that we don't realize the way she used to be on all this stuff.
Right, and it says a lot about her character that she thinks we're so stupid that we're not going to notice, and that she thinks she's so above everything that she doesn't need to respond. I'm not the only one asking these questions. A lot of people are asking these questions because she went out of her way, worked so hard to brand herself as a tough on crime. I think it might have been to deflect sexism of, women not being as tough. I think, that might have had something to do with it. But now she's just turning around because she sees this is what people want. I mean, so who are you as a candidate? How do we know what you actually
She doesn't know.
For?
The answer
right.
is she doesn't even know, right?
Exactly.
She's still figuring out who she is because she's just trying to do whatever to get elected.
Exactly, and I think she's almost banking on the fact now that she won't have to face these questions because if this comes up in a debate and someone's too tough on her or somebody isn't smiling while they're debating her, I don't even know. You're a sexist, right? Nobody will talk about the actual content of the debate. It'll all be about, well, did you see how sexist that male jerk was against Hillary? And it's been even worse than I thought. I knew it would be bad, but it really is, like I mentioned in the open letter too. There is sexism that exists. Women are treated unfairly in a lot of ways, of course. There's a lot of discrimination and stereotypes of everybody and so on. But it's not so. It's important, but it's not so important that it should be preventing us from discussing anything else. It's ridiculous, and that does a total disservice to our entire country.
Now, Kat, you are a woman. And you also are a writer and an analyst of the goings-on in our society, in our country, and everything else. I'm wondering, we were talking before you came on about Joss Whedon. I don't even know if I'm saying his name right. I assume that's how it's said. And how people said that he was chased off of social media by feminists, feminist social justice warriors, the sort of hardline feminists you see there. As somebody who is both female and a writer, an analyst of things, do you find that it's even hard to keep up with the hardline feminist orthodoxy? I mean, are you even aware of where the lines are? Because I know I'm not, but I guess, people would expect that.
Yeah, I mean, I am about as aware as I can be, but only because I very closely monitor it. I can kind of look at something, and a lot of the ways I'll even find some of my stories, I'll say, oh, I bet you there's someone out there saying this is sexist because of this very, very vague, very, very, you have to think really hard to get getting offended, and I'm often correct. But yeah, and,
I mean, I've seen people say, Kat, that standing up for women, that a man now standing up for women's equality, women's rights, is actually sexist because it's like he has to do that because they're weaker and whatever, right? I mean, this is you cannot. It's actually become a position now you can't win. If they decide they're going to go after you, it feels like you're damned if you do, damned if you don't.
You absolutely are, and that extends to so many issues. With the fraternities, right? They're basically there's these feminists are actually calling them rape factories, right? And then so one fraternity they partnered with RAINN. They were going to do an event against rape culture or for sexual assault victims, and then some of these feminists are mad, like how dare they think that they can do that? That they don't know enough about the issue, and they don't.
Right. They used to shame. When I was on campus, Kat, they were shaming people into being what they called allies, which meant you were now spouting the orthodoxy and you were sort of part of the leftist march. Now that's not even okay, right? Like now they're just deciding who the enemy is, and the enemy has to be frozen, pushed off, and destroyed.
Yeah, and then the whole point is too, I don't understand what they're trying to accomplish other than, I don't know, maybe they like to rage. I don't know. Maybe they have anger and they like to be angry. I mean, I really think that it does a disservice too to women, because there are issues that women face, and it really kind of delegitimizes any claim that anyone would have of sexism if you're saying that actually everything's sexist. Because if everything's sexist, then nothing's sexist, right?
I think we've gotten to that point now. I think that even that there's nothing that can be done, especially if you're a guy, if you're a male, and there's nothing you can say that cannot be construed as sexist by women who feel that it is their duty in life. And it's a shame. We've seen this with race discussions as well, that everything can be construed as racist, and it just collapses the discussion. It makes everything worse for everyone. Just one last thing I wanted to ask you about. What do you think about this new trend that apparently even some in the military did this, as I saw in the militarytimes.com piece, of walk a mile in her shoes? Explain walk a mile in her shoes as an awareness-raising exercise to everybody.
Yeah, these guys wear heels and they walk. They go on a march to support sexual assault victims. I actually wrote a satire piece about this. I'm shocked that so many liberals are going for this, because there is a certain segment of people that think even cross-dressers, they're appropriating transgender culture by being cross-dressers, because they get to wear women's clothes on the weekends, and then they get to go back to being, men. I'm kind of surprised. And also, I just don't understand, this isn't going to help anything. In the case of the military, I don't know why we have these guys. I mean, walking in heels, kind of hard. I don't even wear them, when I'm walking to the subway or anything like that.
Yeah, I like to think that I'm something of a feminist, Cat, because I tell all the ladies who listen to my show, don't wear heels unless it's sort of like costuming for a nice event or a party or something, because the comfort of your feet is essential to your everyday life, and they're not comfortable, and ladies should walk around in flats, full stop. That's my position, and I think I'm a feminist for it.
Right, yeah, definitely. And, putting military guys at risk of injury, I might have fallen down if I had to wear heels and walk that long. I'm wearing my flat sandals right now. I have my heels in my bag in case I need them. But yeah.
I'm just kind of psyched that I got verification of my status as a feminist. Thank you for that. I feel like that's a high five.
Definitely.
It's exciting.
All
right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say letting women decide what shoes they want to wear is definitely feminist.
Right. I'm just advocating for foot comfort all around, men, women. I'm equal opportunity when it comes to comfortable feet. I think it's essential, everybody. Words to live by, that and wear sunscreen. Kat Timpf's piece is up on nationalreview.com. It's Are You There, Hillary? It's me, a middle-class millennial female. Kat, as always, thank you for joining.
Thanks for having me.